You're listening to Science Coast with Mallory Havens
Chris White.
And today we're going to talk about sustainability.
Sustainability is a word that I think is thrown around in society a lot. Conversations, especially with young people. I got 3 kids, and it's a hot topic I know with my kids. And talking about how do we become sustainable as a society, they're very concerned about their future. They're concerned about the future of the country. They're concerned about the future of the planet. They're concerned about the future of the world. And these conversations almost always end up using the word sustainable. Are we sustainable? But what does that word mean in the context of environmentalism, the future of the planet, the future of society? The one definition that I like is we will be sustainable when the actions and the consumption that we have today does not impact future generations. So decisions that we make today are not basically taking out loans that future generations will have to repay.
That makes sense. I think of it kind of as whatever I consume and use, I equally do something beneficial for the planet, I guess, so that resources that you're using aren't destroying things irreparably.
Define beneficial, because I think...
Oh, yeah, that's hard. So I try to look for like B Corp certified companies that, are environmentally sustainable. So they're certified that they actually recycle and they're carbon neutral and they do all these good things for the planet, but that makes them really expensive. So I can't afford that for everything unless you want to give me a raise.
I like how you just kind of slipped that one in. We're recording. Oh, you got a raise?
It's on the record.
It's on, okay. We'll talk. And one of the things that you're talking about is it's more expensive. And I think that's one of the challenges. It's so simple for somebody like me, or even lots of Americans who have, in some sense, wealth, to say that we're going to choose a sustainable lifestyle, and then I'm going to feel fine. I'm making decisions that, with my investments, with the purchases I make, I'm only going to buy organic grass-fed milk, right? Milk from grass, and then I feel like I'm saving the planet. Something that happened recently was this notion about recycling. And my wife is particularly angry about this. When she was younger, this whole notion of recycling plastics. And they created the recycling symbol. And they told everybody that plastics is fine because it can be recycled. Just take your plastics, make sure they're not too dirty, put them in the recycling bin. We're going to turn them into the next generation of plastics. And then she found out that that was just a big lie.
It's only like 10% of plastics are actually recyclable.
And it's only a particular type of plastic, as it turns out.
Right, and they can't be combinations of 2 different kinds of plastic. It's very, there was a movement by the plastics industry because they said people wouldn't use it, that they intentionally deceived the population.
And for me, that's one of the things that worries me is how do we know? How do we know that the decisions that we're making are good decisions? And, I get very worried. There's so many different ways that we impact sustainability long-term. Our energy consumption, our eating habits, the types of foods that we eat, how many children we choose to have, how many people are on the planet, the rising standard of living. Everybody wants more. Everybody wants a higher quality of life. And what does that mean? Often quality of life is associated with or defined by consumption.
Yeah, and materialism.
And so is there a different way that we can define quality of life? And that's kind of the challenge, is engaging with society on what does it mean to be happy? What does it mean to have a high quality of life? Does it mean that, I can buy the biggest car and burn the most gasoline?
I'd say no. But that's important to some people. Or do you you get an electric car, but how is that electricity generated? Is it coming from coal? Is it coming from nuclear? Is it coming from gnomes riding bicycles?
It's complicated. And I bought a hybrid plug-in where it has a gas engine and it has an electric motor. And I can get about anywhere from 25 to 30 miles on a charge. Most of my driving falls within that. If I'm going to go to the grocery store, I don't go to a grocery store, which is more than 15 miles away.
Right.
So I can, when I look at it, I'm about 40,000 miles into this vehicle's life. And when I look at how many miles were on pure electric and how many were on the gas engine, it's about 80%, 20%. 80% pure electric, 20% on gas. And typically that happens when I, for example, took the car to Michigan.
Right.
Or if I drive into the city, I can't quite make it all the way back before the battery's dead. And is this sustainable? Is this actually helping the world become a place where my grandchildren will have a good life? It's hard to actually know. One of the challenges is, as you said, where does the electricity come from? And when we decided to go with this electric vehicle, it was because the Union of Concerned Scientists published an article that basically said, in and around the Chicagoland area, the carbon footprint associated with electricity to drive electric vehicles had crossed over and was now lower than the carbon footprint associated with burning gasoline. But it's not zero.
Right. Yep.
And it's only actually a little bit less. The carbon footprint associated with driving a car in and around the Chicago area is only a little bit smaller than the carbon footprint associated with a reasonably fuel-efficient gasoline-powered car.
Because of how the electricity is generated.
Yes.
And then if you think about it too, the lithium in the batteries is a precious resource that is limited. And, that's why you're supposed to recycle your batteries so they can reharvest the lithium out. Then how they get the lithium. And it's just like diamond mining, was my lithium ethically sourced?
And we don't know. And what I worry about is that we're going to run out of rare earths. We're going to run out of lithium. So we need that whole 360 life cycle. We're not sustainable, in my opinion, until we get to the point where, to put it bluntly, we stop taking things out of the earth.
Right.
And we go to that complete recycling where everything that we purchased, then at the end of its consumer life, gets remanufactured into something else.
Right. Yep. It's sort of the carbon cycle, if you're taking an ecosystem without humans, is like a beautifully designed thing, or the energy cycle, where you don't have material goods that you're making, right? Because you consume plant life and other animals, and then you eventually decay, and the carbon in your body becomes available to be used again in other organisms. It's the things we make as humans that have this problem, right? Other animals aren't destroying the planet to the degree that we are.
So I love the way you frame that. Can we dig into that just a little bit deeper? So when you talk about the carbon cycle, can you give a little more context and understanding of what you're talking about?
So in the most simplistic form, energy enters our planet from the sun, right? And then photosynthetic organisms take carbon from the atmosphere, carbon dioxide, and they convert it into sugars, organic materials, and make oxygen in the process. And that goes to mitochondria, which plants also have, but us heterotrophs that eat other things.
Wait, heterotrophs?
Yeah, so other eaters. We have to eat organic materials from other living sources. We can't do photosynthesis. So we take the sugars and the oxygen and we convert them back into CO2 and water, which then goes back to the photosynthetic organisms, and the process continues. So it's highly sustainable because photosynthetic organisms would eventually run out of CO2 potentially without heterotrophs. They probably wouldn't. They'd probably be fine because they also break it down in mitochondria. But as heterotrophs, we consume the photosynthetic materials generated, whether it be from eating other animals that ate plants or eating plants. All that carbon goes back to CO2. If you lose weight, if you burn energy in food, the carbon leaves your body as CO2. You exhale it.
So how long has this carbon cycle been active on the planet?
Since living organisms existed. I mean, maybe since photosynthesis arose, that wasn't like, basically all time.
And that's exactly what I was trying to get at, is you've just described a truly sustainable system that can perpetuate itself effectively indefinitely.
Right.
And so my concern is that what we're doing as humans right now cannot be perpetuated indefinitely. There's an end date.
Oh, yes.
There's a use by date right now. and then what happens thereafter? And I know my children are very concerned about this. And one of the challenges for me is the number of humans that are on the planet. When I think about my consumption and the fact that there are 8 billion people out there right now.
Yeah.
And they're all interested in a good, healthy meal. They all want to eat meat, and that's one of the other challenges.
Not all of them.
That's true. That's true. Many of them.
Yes.
And that's one of the unsustainable factors that's happened recently, is the amount of meat consumed internationally has increased significantly. Eating meat is a luxury, and it's only been in the past couple hundred years that the availability of meat to the bulk of the population has become common in some sense.
Right. Yeah. And what a portion of meat is, 4 ounces, that's not what people eat as a serving. It's like a deck of cards. That's a serving of meat. You need 1 of those a day if you're following a food pyramid.
And yes.
And you go to a restaurant and they're like, half-pound burger. Or
So what do you think we can do to help people understand that we're consuming our way past what we can sustain?
I think people might understand that, but aren't willing to sacrifice their own comfort.
I like the way that I live.
Yeah.
I like having a warm house in the winter and air conditioning in the summertime.
Me too. Particularly that AC. I just bought a new air conditioner last summer. It was hot.
So figuring out how to continue to be sustainable, I personally have been trying to practice using less. When I worked in the city and I had an apartment in the city, I would ride my bike or take public transportation. I didn't keep a car, and I felt good about that. I got some exercise, and I felt that maybe that was a better choice than consuming gasoline to drive myself around. With the current job that I have, riding a bike to work isn't realistic.
Right.
It's actually dangerous.
Right. Given where our university is located, you would get hit by a car.
So we create this society where, on one hand, I want to make good decisions, but if I want to participate in society, then I have little choice but to do certain things.
Right. Whenever my 4-year-old throws a temper tantrum about wanting a toy, I say that's the high price materialism. To him, I don't think it really hits home. It's also the title of a book by Tim Kasser about materialism in society. But I say that to him every time. Well, buddy, that's the high price of materialism. You're going to feel bad for a few minutes.
Wow. Well, this is just the beginning of a conversation. I think we're going to have to come back to this conversation again and again. Opening thoughts. That's what I thought this was going to be. Opening thoughts about sustainability, maybe a entryway into a future conversation.
Maybe have a guest on here that works in sustainability. One Jerry Kavoris.
Hey, all right. I'm in. Somebody who maybe knows more than I do?
Yeah, or me in sustainability. It's not my forte. But you've been listening to Science Coast, and the views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are the speaker's own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of Lewis University. The material and information presented here is for general information purposes only. The Lewis University name and all forms and abbreviations are the property of its owner, and its use does not imply endorsement of or opposition to any specific organization, product, or service. This podcast was produced in the WLRA podcast studios at Lewis University. Visit lewisu.edu for more information about Lewis University. And now you get that disclaimer every time. This is Mallory Havens and
Chris White.
Thanks for listening.
See ya.